December 20th, District Court, Courtroom number 4.
Mr. Justice, please explain yourself.
It's very simple. There isn't much to explain. The defendant, Miss Athena Sykes, might not be innocent.
What are you talking about? That case from 7 years ago has been settled.
I'm not talking about the past here. I'm talking about the present case. It's still not clear who killed Clay Terran.
But Apollo, why would you?
Miss Sykes, please listen quietly to what I have to say.
What in the world is Apollo trying to do?
Your Honor, please allow me a little of the court's time.
But this is a trial for the case from 7 years ago.
Miss Blackwell, I'd like to ask a favor of you. Just as you lost someone close to you, I lost someone close to me too. I'm sure you want to know the real truth of what happened as much as I do.
Apollo. Sure, you know I'm all for the truth. Now let's see you expose the princess's guilt. Judge, I give my permission. Continue with the trial.
Very well. Is that all right with you, Prosecutor Edgeworth?
The prosecution has no objections. Let's hear Mr. Justice's testimony. I'll have the police's investigation report brought immediately.
Not you too, Edgeworth. I really hope it's because you have something up your sleeve.
Very well. Your opening statement, please, Prosecutor Edgeworth.
As you wish. Let's review the case of the murder of Mr. Clay Terran. It was made clear in the previous trial that Solomon Starbuck was not his killer. Therefore, the true culprit was someone else. On that day, the culprit waited for the astronauts in boarding lounge 1, when the two men made their escape out of the Space Museum. The killer attacked Mr. Terran with the same type of knife that was used 7 years ago. The murderer then escaped into the Space Museum. Next, Director Yuri Cosmos switched the launch pads. After that, the culprit exited the Space Museum and escaped via boarding lounge 2. Therefore, this trial must make clear who Mr. Terran's true killer was. In other words, we must discover who it was that escaped through the Space Museum that day.
Thank you, Prosecutor Edgeworth. Mr. Wright, is the defense ready?
Yes, Your Honor. I'd better rearrange my evidence. Relevant evidence swapped into the court record.
Now then, Mr. Justice, your testimony, if you please.
Witness testimony. Apollo Justice's accusation. I suspected Miss Sykes of the murder of Clay Terran. My growing suspicions were confirmed when this incriminating evidence presented itself. In addition, she's the only one who could have utilized the launch pad switch to escape. That is why I wish to indict Miss Sykes on the charge of murder.
Order! Order in the court! Mr. Justice, you realize you are charging your own co-worker with murder, don't you?
Yes, Your Honor, because that is the conclusion my investigation has led me to.
But Apollo, why? How could you suspect me too?
Mr. Wright, your cross-examination. Please.
I don't get it. Just what did you find out over the past few days to make you think this?
Time to find out. I'm not gonna like it. I suspected Miss Sykes of the murder of Clay Terran. What first made you suspicious of Miss Sykes? It all started when Miss Sykes and I were investigating the crime scene. When she saw the weapon that killed Mr. Terran, my bracelet reacted. She said she'd never seen the knife before, but my bracelet told me otherwise. And then every time after that, my bracelet would react when she talked about the case. Poor Apollo must have been beside himself during that investigation. I didn't know what to do or think. I couldn't even sleep. In that condition, I knew I wouldn't be any good in court. so I decided to wear an eye patch, so I wouldn't be able to perceive any of her tells. So that's why Apollo was acting so strangely. But the reason Miss Sykes unconsciously reacted to the knife that way is because she stabbed her mother's murderer with one identical to it 7 years ago.
Objection!
But that knife was also the murder weapon that was used to kill Clay Terran. My bracelet could have also reacted to her because she knew she was his killer too. That pose looks strangely familiar. Ugh. I guess he has a point. But my bracelet wasn't the only reason I became suspicious of her. My growing suspicions were confirmed when this incriminating evidence presented itself.
Hold it!
That's the lighter that was found in the Space Museum with her fingerprints on it, right? But even if it seems decisive, there must be other facts we don't know about it yet. If that's so, go ahead and prove it then. Look, honestly, I don't want to believe it's true either, but Miss Sykes was the only one who was in the Space Museum at the time of the murder. But Mr. Justice, Miss Sykes had absolutely no motive to kill Mr. Terran.
Objection!
7 years ago, Miss Sykes lived at that Cosmos Space Center. It wouldn't be strange if she had some kind of connection to it. Besides, people sometimes kill for motives we can't even imagine. Not again. I know you've seen plenty of cases like that in your own career, Mr. Wright. I still can't believe this. How can you actually suspect Athena, Apollo? In addition, she's the only one who could have utilized the launch pad switch to escape.
Hold it!
Isn't it possible that somebody else used that same escape route? I'm afraid not, Mr. Wright. Why not? Recall there is a security camera in boarding lounge 1 aimed at the launch pad door. It's the camera that captured Mr. Terran and Mr. Starbuck. But there's also another security camera in boarding lounge 2. It recorded Mr. Terran's killer, or rather Miss Sykes, coming out of the Space Museum. A camera in boarding lounge 2. First I've heard of it, but it makes sense. Athena said she had snuck into the Space Museum the night before the incident, and then was overcome and passed out until around noon the next day. I was out until about noon on the next day. I didn't even know about the explosions. When I woke up, nobody was around, so I just went out in the boarding lounge 2. That must have been when the camera captured her. And that's what made Apollo suspect her even more. But wait a minute. In that case, it most likely recorded the true culprit as well.
Objection!
That's a negative on that one too, Mr. Wright. In the footage taken after the incident, Miss Sykes is the only one who appears.
What? Why? Order in the court.
That can't be. But if it is, then it is incredibly incriminating.
Wasn't it you who proved in the previous trial that the way the true culprit escaped was via the Space Museum after the pads had been switched? A fact you previously proved turned on its ear, leaving your client high and dry. I must say, that is vintage Phoenix Wright.
That is why I wish to indict Miss Sykes on the charge of murder.
Hold it!
Believing in your client to the end is a basic principle of good defense. Shouldn't you extend that same principle to your own coworker? You're probably right. Maybe I'm not even fit to be a lawyer. However, I don't care. This case is special to me. Clay was my friend. And that's why I just have to know the truth. Apollo suspected his trusted co-worker of killing his friend. To dispel his doubts, he investigated on his own, but that only led to more doubts. Apollo must have been really struggling with this. Well, Apollo may have doubts, but I'll say it again. Athena Sykes isn't the murderer. Then I have only one thing to say. Evidence is everything in court.
Kristoff,
Even after the events of Turnabout succession, your influence still lingers within your former protege. Well, Mr. Wright, think you have the concrete proof to knock down my arguments?
Your arguments have been very clear, Mr. Justice, and your facts appear to be indisputable.
Well, Mr. Wright, what do you think of my theory? It looks like not even you can deny it. Miss Sykes was the only one who used the only possible escape route.
Under these circumstances, there can be no other suspect but the defendant.
Unless you think there was an alternative escape route. Is that what you think, Mr. Wright?
Is that what you think, Mr. Wright?
Is that what you think, Phoenix? Was there an alternative escape route?
Yes.
Yes, of course there must have been. Just don't ask me what. You're just bluffing again, aren't you? Me? Bluff? No way. He knows me too well. It's fine, Mr. Wright. Even a bluff would suit me just fine. As long as you can clear up this doubt inside me. Wait, so is that what this is all about? I want to believe in Athena. I really do. But what is faith without doubt? That's why I need to question her guilt. So that once the truth finally comes out, I can really fully trust her. So that you can really trust me?
It seems your junior partner has just showed us what trials are truly all about.
I believe you're right.
We prosecutors painstakingly question every detail in pursuit of the defendant,
while we lawyers believe in and defend our clients to the end.
When both sides go all out against each other, that's when we discover the truth. Precisely. And when the battle is over, we will understand the true meaning of trust. That is exactly what trials are about. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. I couldn't ignore the seed of doubt that was growing inside me, so I decided I need to face it head on. No matter what the truth is that's waiting ahead, I won't be afraid. That's so like Apollo, always uber earnest about things like this. Mr. Justice, I vow to dispel every last bit of doubt in your heart. Good, because I want to believe in Miss Sykes again.
Okay, I got that one.
You're really hoping there was an alternative route, aren't you, Apollo? But if I use the process of elimination, there really aren't that many possibilities. Director Cosmos was at the southern exit, leaving only the control room and the corridor to the Space Museum. Which door could the culprit have escaped through? Come on, Mr. Wright! Where do you think the culprit escaped to?
Sure, the Space Museum corridor, where else?
Take that! They really only could have escaped to the corridor to the Space Museum. All they had to do was use the unconscious Mr. Starbucks Prince to get through that door.
Objection!
It appears that all you're trying to establish is Miss Sykes' guilt. If the culprit used that route, the only exit would have been into boarding lounge 2. The logical conclusion of your argument is that the killer is none other than the defendant. Ugh. I knew it. That's the only way it could be, huh? If the culprit escaped into the corridor that leads to the Space Museum, then I guess it's true. The only exit would have been into boarding lounge 2. But Miss Sykes was the only person captured by the boarding lounge 2 security camera. I investigated the crime scene thoroughly. But the only place the culprit could have escaped to was the Space Museum corridor. There weren't any other secret corridors or anything. So that leaves us with no other conclusion to draw but that Athena Sykes was the culprit. What could the answer be? Was there really no other escape route? But hold on a second. What if... No way. Where did those mysterious leaves we saw in the corridor come from? What if they're a clue to the culprit's real escape route? I think it is possible that the culprit escaped into the Space Museum, but then came out using a route other than into Boarding Lounge 2. Oh? Launchpad 1 and the Space Museum were switched after the bombing, meaning the Space Museum corridor was moving along the rail at the time, which is exactly when an alternative escape route opened up for our culprit. Are you kidding me? Judging by the intense look in your eyes, I take it you're serious. Very well then, Mr. Wright, do tell. Where could the culprit have gone from the museum corridor besides Boarding Lounge 2? That answer's simple. Basically, outside. I don't know if it would work or not, but hey, let's try it. We found something odd while investigating the museum corridor this afternoon. Namely, a few dead leaves on the floor. Considering where dead leaves come from, they point us to exactly where the culprit escaped to. Yes, I remember seeing some leaves myself. Ah! Do you mean... Yup. While the Space Museum was in motion just beyond the corridor's safety door, was an alternative place that the culprit could use to escape. In other words, the culprit's real escape route was the area outside the Space Center. You're freaking insane!
Objection!
Do you know how impossible that would be? That corridor is level with the 3rd floor. Even if the culprit tried to leap to the outside wall of the Space Center building, they would fall to their death.
Objection!
Ordinarily, yes, but after the bombing incident, the culprit could make use of a certain item. And what item was it exactly, Mr. Wright? Alright, this is what the culprit used to leap to the outside wall of the main building. That answer's simple. The emergency ladder.
Take that!
An emergency ladder? There was an emergency ladder in the 4th floor robotics lab, and it was used that day after the explosions to help evacuate people. Miss Blackwell herself used that ladder to escape down to ground level. Recall that the launch pads were switched after the ladder was lowered. The corridor would have passed by the ladder while the pads were being switched, and that's when the culprit literally sprang into action. And leapt onto the ladder. What? Who would have imagined? Order in the court! Well, an alternative escape route seems to have emerged. Which means someone other than Miss Sykes could have been the culprit, right?
Objection!
Now what? Making things up on the fly in an attempt to sway the court again, are we, Mr. Wright? Your theory has so many holes it puts Swiss cheese to shame. Alright then. Name one. I have here detailed information about the Space Center. According to this, the distance between the museum corridor and the main building during movement is a full 20 feet. 20 feet? You're pulling my leg, right? In addition, the corridor is 3 floors from the ground, or roughly 50 feet. What's more, the culprit would be leaping to a precarious place, an unstable ladder. Ugh. Human beings feel fear in dangerous situations. It's a basic survival instinct. An ordinary person would certainly hesitate before jumping, or even freeze in fear and not jump at all.
Objection!
But the culprit had just murdered someone. They weren't in an ordinary state of mind.
Objection!
Nevertheless, why would they have taken that kind of risk? They could have waited for the switch to be complete and escaped to Boarding Lounge 2.
Objection!
Because there was a security camera in Boarding Lounge 2. The culprit knew they would be recorded if they left the Space Museum that way.
Objection!
In that case, the culprit could have hidden in the museum until things settled down, and then blended in with the other people after the museum was opened.
That's a good point. But you claim that, despite all this, the culprit took a 20-foot death-defying leap. And all in the brief moment the corridor and ladder passed by each other? That's also a good point. They would have needed a running start while the corridor was moving to make that jump. If their timing was off, or if they couldn't jump far enough, it would have been instant death. What kind of person would attempt something like that?
Stop bringing up good points, Edgeworth.
This true culprit of yours is nothing but a figment of your imagination. Why do you always have to point out every flaw?
Mr. Edgeworth's right. That does sound pretty insane. The culprit would have to be someone who feels no fear, like a stuntman. But everyone feels fear on some level, right?
Wait a minute. Aha! I've got it this time.
I can prove that there is someone who could have used this alternative escape route.
Oh, can you now?
This proves the possibility of a person who could have used this alternative escape route.
The Phantom Psych Profile.
Take that!
What's that, Mr. Wright?
This is a certain person's very interesting psych profile. The subject doesn't experience feelings like normal people do. In other words, this person doesn't feel happiness, sadness, or fear. Doesn't feel fear.
Right! You can't be serious!
Without the constraint of fear. He could easily do what an ordinary person wouldn't dare! Just as you or I could do a broad jump on the ground without the slightest fear. This subject could make a 20-foot leap 50 feet up in the air. He could choose this extreme way of escaping without hesitation. So you're saying that to a person without fear, the alternative route would be quicker and eliminate the chance that they'd be spotted? That's definitely pretty extreme, Mr. Wright.
But was there such a person there at the scene?
Yes, the Phantom. That mysterious, shadowy figure who keeps popping up.
Oh dear. The Phantom. Again?
I knew the Phantom was there behind the scenes of the Space Center bombing, but I wasn't sure if he was connected to the murder of Clay Terran as well. However, now it's all clear. The Phantom is the one who not only bombed the Space Center, but also killed Mr. Terran.
What?
That wasn't easy mixing two voices at once. Not pretty.
Order in the court! Order, I say! Mr. Wright, please continue.
There were just too many similarities between this case and the one from 7 years ago. But why, you may ask? It can only be because both incidents were the work of a same Phantom. So then this Phantom is the one who killed Clay? But who is he? This Phantom has been haunting this case, pulling the strings in the background. Who could this unidentified international spy be?
Right. This escape route must have been a part of the Phantom's plan from the start, as was tricking Director Cosmos into switching the launch pads. The bomb on the second floor was meant to make the elevators and stairs unusable. That's why he gave advance warning and planted the bombs where he did.
Yes, I think you're right. But it doesn't explain this one last thing. So I lowered my emergency ladder like the detective leading the evacuation told me to. But it was such a pain. Why couldn't they have used the ladders in the other rooms? The robotics lab wasn't the only room with an emergency ladder. But he couldn't have made that leap unless he was certain which one it would be. So you mean the Phantom must be someone who knew that particular ladder was going to be used?
That's right.
Who could it be?
Wait a minute. So I lowered my emergency ladder like the detective leading the evacuation told me to. Miss Blackwell lowered the ladder after being told to by the detective leading the...
Ah!
You've got to be kidding me. Did you figure it out, Wright? Do you know who the Phantom is? Yes, I do.
Who is it? Who killed Clay?
Our mystery spy, known as the Phantom, is none other than...
You, Bobby Fulbright.
After the explosions, a member of the staff crossed paths with a certain detective. I was on duty on the 4th floor. It was quite the madhouse, I tell you. As for the detective who was leading the evacuation from the 4th floor, he had a very specific objective in mind. So I lowered my emergency ladder, like the detective leading the evacuation told me to. His objective was to secure his own escape route. We lowered an emergency ladder from a 4th floor window and escaped that way. Once everyone else got out safely, I made my way down to and headed to the shelter. This is the detective you all know. He's even the lead detective on the current case. He appears to be a very emotional man, but his psych profile says he is without emotion.
Take that!
What? Are you saying? You mean the Phantom is Detective Bobby Fulbright?
Exactly. We were all taken in by his fake persona. Detective Fulbright's real identity is the Phantom.
Order in the court! Mr. Wright, how could this be?
That's easy, Your Honor. Detective Fulbright was leading the 4th floor evacuation effort. Our first clue is that he made no attempt to have any other ladder put to use. The ladder in the robotics lab is the only one he ordered to be lowered. The second is that he directed everybody to the basement shelter via this ladder. Verily, it was all a part of his plan to create an escape route. After Detective Fulbright saw to it that the ladder was lowered from the robotics lab, he went to the lounge, where he killed Clay Terran and escaped into the Space Museum. The museum started moving slowly, so he waited for the right time, got a running start, and just as the corridor was passing the ladder, he leaped onto it.
I don't believe it! That addle-pated detective did all that?
Was it really him? I mean, all this time I thought... Sorry, we didn't catch your name.
My name? I'm Bobby Fulbright, the heroic detective who defends our good citizens from evil. The champion of justice who's come running whenever you're in need. And my catchphrase? It's in justice we trust.
Now we know the true meaning behind those words.
Then, his concern for Simon was also just one big act?
I swore to reform Prosecutor Blackwell and make him a valued member of society again. So I can't just sit by and watch him give in to his emotions and tear the defendant apart.
That monster killed Clay? He had me completely fooled! Come to think of it, he's the one who brought that bloodstained lighter to court, too! The scumbag even made me turn on Athena! Damn it! How the hell did I fall for all that?
For him to have wormed his way into the police department as well. Your Honor,
The defense demands to question Detective Bobby Fulbright.
Yes, I agree that we need to hear from him right away. The court will take a short recess and then Detective Fulbright will take the stand.
What a shocking twist. Although I played this game back in 2013 and I know it way too well. December 20th, 5:13 p.m., District Court, Defendant Lobby number 5. Thank you so much, Mr. Wright. If it wasn't for everything you did, I...
Don't thank me yet. We still have an uphill battle to fight.
You got it, boss. Apollo!
Well, this is awkward.
Athena, can you do me a favor? Huh? What is it? Could you... punch me, please? What? Why should I do that? Because I should have believed in you. I let the seed of doubt inside me get the best of me. I'm really sorry that I didn't trust... Ouch! Don't be such a dope! I was really touched by what you did. Huh? Now what are you talking about? I want to believe in Athena. I really do. But what is faith without doubt? That's why I need to question her guilt. So that once the truth finally comes out, I can really fully trust her. You took the time and effort to genuinely think about who I am and what I'm made of. After all that, how could I punch a true friend like you, Apollo?
You didn't have any trouble slapping him a second ago.
Thanks, Athena. And thanks for waking me up to reality again. Guess I know now who to call if I ever get sleepy in court. It looks like you have some promising young people working under you. Edgeworth. Yeah, I think they're pretty great myself, and they're not afraid to keep me in line. Anyway, I have some very good news. Ora Blackwell has surrendered, and the hostages have been set free. Trucy and all the others? Oh, thank goodness. Miss Blackwell said she had something she really needed to do, so I granted her special permission to do what she must. I wonder what it is. Miss Blackwell. I didn't come to apologize, if that's what you're thinking. My actions are what allowed the truth of what happened 7 years ago to come to light. But I did come because I have something to say to all of you. Miss Ora. She better not be here to complain about something. Miss Blackwell, I want to apologize to you. The fact that you couldn't trust the court system is our fault. Yes, it's true the courts are filled with incompetent idiots. Still, I suppose I could let you handle the rest of this case for me. Oh, Miss Sara, does this mean you're starting to trust the system again? No, of course not. Be quiet, Uncle Junk. It's just, I wouldn't mind if you were the ones who took Menace's killer down. Leave it to us. We'll get him. So I guess that means she's starting to trust us at least. Ora. Simon, I'm so glad both you and the princess were cleared of all suspicion. And it's all thanks to me and my robots. You better be grateful. I never imagined you would go that far, though you always were extreme. But I don't recall ever requesting your help. As close as ever, I see. Well, now that you've been released, I guess it's my turn to go live in the slammer. I just hope you're not the prosecutor for my trial. You'd probably give me the death penalty. You know me all too well. I guess love can take on a variety of expressions, including stunted in their case. But I truly was about to be executed tomorrow. Though because of you, it looks like I won't be crossing the sticks just yet. You have my heartfelt thanks, Sora. I'm sorry I caused you so much anguish.
Simon. I'm so glad, Simon. So very glad to hear you say that.
Aura.
All right, that's enough of that. Bailiff, take me to the detention center.
What Miss Blackquill did was inexcusable, but it's clear she did it out of love for her brother.
I still can't wrap my mind around Detective Fulbright being the Phantom.
I can't believe he killed Clay.
Right. And murdered my mentor,
Which brought great distress upon little Athena.
Chief Prosecutor.
Yes? I would ask a favor. Would you allow me to stand at the prosecutor's bench for this trial? I wish to claim the Phantom's head by my own hand. That was my plan all along. After all, it's highly unconventional for a man in my position to stand in court.
Sir.
The formal paperwork has yet to be filed, but you are hereby conditionally released. Please take the prosecutor's bench in your official capacity and uncover the truth by your own hand.
I'm much obliged. The day to part with these has come at last. Chief Prosecutor, could you?
He is now a free man.
How long have I waited? Maybe it's the sense of freedom, but even the air seems fresher, the light brighter. And I will relish slashing that blackguard Fulbright to shreds without mercy.
I don't have to be able to read his heart to see how happy he is.
I'm so glad, but I won't cry just yet. After all, we still got a trial to finish.
It's okay to cry, Athena. I promise.
Prosecutor Blackquill, Mr. Wright, please avenge Clay's death for me.
What are you talking about, Apollo? You're coming to the defense's bench with me.
I am?
Well, I can't expect Athena to assist me now, can I? She's the defendant. That leaves you, Apollo.
But are you sure you want me? I took a leave of absence and everything.
Well, our office is pretty short-handed, and you're all I've got.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Apollo. Athena, I can say it with all my heart now. I believe in your complete innocence, and now we're gonna prove it to the world. Thank you, Apollo. I know you can do it.
So, you won't be needing that eye patch anymore, right?
Right, because I'm fine now.
Now this is the Apollo I know.
Welcome back, Apollo.
It's almost time for the trial to restart, though it looks like you have things well in hand. Yup, I should head back to the prosecutor's office.
But why?
I want to look into a few things. Namely, the first people on the scene 7 years ago, the facial data registered by the robot, and Detective Fulbright's background. Sounds great, Edgeworth. Thanks. I expect to be repaid with a victory, right? Now, if you'll excuse me. Okay, you two all set to go?
You bet I am. Let's do this.
This is it. The final battle. The murder of Apollo's friend. The courtroom bombing incident. in the case that ushered in the dark age of the law 7 years ago. Destiny has called us to bring the one responsible for it all to justice today.